Hello, New Hampshire Realtors. I am Patti Kemen, NHAR's Federal Political Coordinator to Senator Jeanne Shaheen. And today we're continuing our video series relating to real estate during the pandemic. So without further ado, let's bring our guest, New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Patti. It's so nice to be able to join you and Dave and Bob Quinn and BJ and all the realtors in New Hampshire to talk about the housing challenges that we face today, because the pandemic has exacerbated what has already been happening in the housing market.
Right. Well, thanks for taking the time to be here. Senator, we'll get right to our questions. Last week, Congress passed some important changes to the Paycheck Protection Program, which will be important to many realtors who have received those funds. Can you give us a quick summary of these changes?
Yeah, we've done a couple of things in the last month. What we did last week was to extend the deadline for applying to August the 8th, because otherwise it would have ended at the end of June. So that's very important for anybody who may still have a loan pending that you're still trying to get approved. What we did earlier in the month was to address some of the issues that had come up as part of the program. I was hearing from businesses, I'm sure you all have been feeling this, that there needed to be more flexibility for the time in which the funds could be used. So we changed that from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, that there needed to be more flexibility in how the division of funds are used between workers and other uses. So, and actually when we passed the legislation, we had done that, but the guidance that was issued from the Department of Treasury was much more restrictive. So what we did was change that ratio to 60% for employees and 40% for other uses. And then we also extended the payback period. So for those people who, for whatever reason, are not able to turn that loan into a grant and have to pay back some portion of it, we extended the time to do that to 5 years, no less than 5 years from 2 years. So hopefully more flexibility in the program to make it easier for folks. And we're actually working on another round now, hoping that if we have another legislative package of support, that we can get a second round for the PPP program for those businesses who used that initial loan, played by the rules, and have now run out and need some help to get through this next month or so. So hopefully we'll be able to get another package of help for people in a next round of legislation.
Thank you. You also introduced the Prioritized Paycheck Protection Program Act, or more simply the P4 Act. That bill would allow small businesses to access the second round of PPP loans, particularly those in the restaurant and hospitality business. That is very important to our commercial real estate sector. Here in New Hampshire, which has been hit particularly hard because many businesses are not able to pay their rent. What is the likelihood of that bill passing? And I might interject here, I think you are very familiar with the restaurant in Durham that has closed their doors. I don't know if you've heard, but Young's.
Oh yes, I was so sad to see Young's close their doors. They've been such an institution in Durham since I moved there, 40 years ago.
Yeah, but this is happening all around, and they do need more help. So, so if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely, they do. And as I was saying, we are hoping to get a second round of help through the PPP program. That I was referring to that P4 prioritized paycheck protection legislation. Mm-hmm. And as you point out, some of the industries that have been hardest hit are the hospitality industry, restaurants who were the first to be closed and have been the last to be opened. And for many of those businesses, they just need another month or so to be able to get them through to when they can open. And so hopefully we're going to be able to get this done. The legislation that I introduced with Ben Cardin, who is the top Democrat on the Small Business Committee, and Chris Coons from Delaware, is that prioritized Paycheck Protection Program. We are now working also with Marco Rubio, who's the chair of the Small Business Committee, and Susan Collins from Maine. It was the four of us, Senators Rubio, Cardin, and Collins, and I, who originally put together the Paycheck Protection Program that was in the CARES Act back in March. And four of us are now working to see if we can't get a bipartisan agreement to do a second round of help for small businesses through another Paycheck Protection Program. So I'm hopeful that because we're working in a bipartisan way, we're going to be able to get this done.
Great, thank you. We talked about the CARES Act, and this is a very important act for a lot of self-employed people, but
right.
The CARES Act extended unemployment benefits to the self-employed, which has proved an invaluable benefit for many realtors who face the loss in their income. On July 31st, the enhanced unemployment benefit, meaning
right.
that extra $600 per week, will end. As you know, many tenants and homeowners have relied upon these extra dollars in order to stay current on their rent and mortgages. Do you think that the benefits should continue?
You know, Patti, I just had a call earlier this morning with housing advocates from around the state, including Dean Kristen from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority and some of our CAP agencies, some of folks who represent homeless. They are all very concerned about the housing situation in the state, as I know you all are. And one of the things that has been very helpful to people trying to stay in their rental units for people to avoid eviction, in addition to the moratorium, which ended July 1st, has been that additional unemployment, $600 unemployment benefit. That's been the positive. On the other side of that, I've heard from a number of small businesses, again, particularly in the hospitality industry, that they're having trouble hiring people because of that additional unemployment benefit. So I think we need to look at what we do going forward. There is legislation that would continue the benefit until unemployment in the state has gotten down to where it was before the pandemic. So that would be a long time in New Hampshire, given where we are right now in double-digit unemployment and the fact that we were under 3% unemployment back in February. But I think some version that allows those dollars to be phased out so that people aren't immediately facing the end of the help so that they can continue to pay their bills, stay in, pay their rent, put food on the table is going to be really important. And we need to think about how to do that and do it thoughtfully in a way that both encourages people to go back to work, but also recognizes that there are a lot of people who still need help. Again, I think that will be a point of negotiation in any other package of legislation that comes out of Washington.
Okay, thank you. You've been very busy. You've also introduced the Hope for Homes Act, which deals with residential efficiency and provides incentives for residential homeowners to make certain improvements. Can you give us some highlights of that bill?
Yeah, well, some of you may know that I've worked on energy efficiency for a very long time. Actually, it's something I worked on when I was governor. And one of the things we saw after the financial crisis in 2008 was how important Recovery Act funds were in providing improvements to homes that people could then make more energy efficient, which in the long term saves money because it saves on your electric bill, it saves on heat or air conditioning, whatever. And it's something that we really need to continue to support. I like to say energy efficiency is the cheapest, fastest way to deal with our energy needs. And that's what Hope for Homes would do, is provide a fund to encourage energy efficiency on the part of homeowners and provide some assistance to people as they're trying to do that. And I'm hopeful that we can get some version of that into whatever package of assistance we provide, because I think continuing to encourage energy efficiency, particularly for us in the Northeast where housing stock is older than in a lot of parts of the country, is really critical.
I agree. I actually have a relative who purchased a home last fall, virtually no insulation at all, had to do other things, didn't put the insulation in right away, but needs to put it in now. And financially, it's going to be a struggle. So would this Hope for Homes Act, would this be able to assist this individual if once this gets approved?
Well, hopefully, depending upon how he actually provides for that insulation and who does the work, and whether it qualifies for the efficiency requirements that are in the bill. But yes, hopefully it should.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. One of the governor's emergency orders, Governor Sununu here in New Hampshire, which has proven to be very helpful to the real estate industry, has to do with allowing remote notarizations. I know there is an effort in Congress to expand access to remote online notarizations with certain minimum standards. This is critical to realtors. And if we were able to have this notarization, Congress expand the access to these remote notarizations, it would be so helpful and less stressful for a lot of our clients. So.
Yeah, I think so too, Patti. You know, it's interesting because I had not been aware of that bill until I got the briefing for this conversation today. And it's the kind of thing that makes so much sense, especially in an emergency. Now, I think one of the things that is going to happen as the result of this experience with the pandemic is that there are a lot of things that we're going to do differently in how we do business. And this is one of those things we ought to think about, because as you point out, it would make life so much easier, not just for the seller and the realtor, but for the buyer. And it's the kind of thing that just makes sense, particularly in an emergency. So I'm hopeful that we can get this done. And I'm going to, when I get back to Washington, or even before then, I'm going to ask my staff to take a look at that legislation, because there are changes that provide more flexibility that we need to address, not just in terms of notarizing, but in many of the other requirements that we have at the federal level for how grants work, how programs work, that we need to really look at and examine and see if we can't provide more flexibility to make them work better during this time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, and this bill was introduced by, it was bipartisan bill. It was introduced by Mike Warner, a Democrat, and Kevin Kramer, a Republican. So we're all keeping our fingers crossed to see if this.
That's a good sign, the fact that it's bipartisan.
Right, right. Okay, New Hampshire. New Hampshire has experienced its lowest housing inventory in history. I work with people all the time who want to stay in New Hampshire, but can't afford and can't find adequate, affordable housing. We recognize many of these issues are local, but is there anything at the federal level, which can be done to expand housing opportunities in New Hampshire?
Well, I think we ought to think about it in three ways. And as you point out, and as I said in my opening, this crisis that we're in, this pandemic, has really exacerbated the housing crisis that already existed. As all of you know so well, and you pointed out, Patti, our inventory is very low, and it has been for some time. Rental housing is almost non-available. The vacancy rate is less than 1% in New Hampshire. And it's a crisis that is affecting our businesses. Before the pandemic, it didn't matter what part of the state I was in, the business community raised housing as an issue, affordable housing for their workers. I think we ought to be thinking about several things at the federal level, and a couple of pieces of legislation. Well, there's been legislation introduced to address all of these. There is legislation that would set up a rental housing fund that Senator Brown from Ohio is sponsoring. I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation. It would make available about $100 billion that could be used to help people deal with the rental crisis that we're in right now. There's also legislation that would expand the low-income housing tax credit, which would encourage and incentivize developers to help build more affordable housing. Again, something that I think is very important. There is also legislation that has come out of the House that is a major infrastructure package that includes housing as part of that infrastructure package. I think whatever we do as we're thinking about long-term, we need to make investments in this country and in our economy. And those aren't just roads and bridges and water systems, water and sewer systems and broadband, but we need to think about housing as part of that, because housing has become a critical concern. It's maybe worse in New Hampshire than in a number of other states, but it's an issue all over this country. And so we need to think about how we can encourage more investment in our housing stock in the country. And I'm hopeful that as we're thinking about how we get this economy back on its feet, and once we get through the short term of this pandemic, that we will look at a major infrastructure investment to help put people back to work, to begin to address the backlog of shortcomings that we have in so many areas, and housing is certainly one of those.
Thank you, Senator. Before we leave, is there anything you would like to let us address or let us know what's going on that might impact realtors as far as our ability to do our business and to assist our clients and customers? Is there anything that you can, insight you can give us?
Well, Patti, you do a great job in New Hampshire. You and I have known each other for over 30 years. And so I know how committed you are to the real estate industry and how hard you work to support it. I know that VJ in Washington does the same thing as he works to try and promote policies that support the real estate industry in this country. And that, I think, is one of the ongoing things that you and all of the realtors who will see this can do, is continue to encourage action in Washington, not just to address the remote notarization bill, but as you think about the policies that we need to see in New Hampshire and across this country to invest in housing, to invest in the real estate market, your voices make a huge difference. You know, one of the things that I have talked about almost regularly as I have been out is that meeting that we had several years ago when we were talking about student loans. And one of the things you all talked about was the fact that because young people getting out of college are having to pay back student loans, it means that they can't invest in housing when they want to. You know, they're getting married later, they're having kids later, they're buying homes later. They can't do that, and it affects what's happening in the housing market. You know, things like helping students get their student loans paid off, reducing the interest rate on those student loans. Those kinds of policies, which aren't directly about real estate, but they have an impact, are so important. So as you're thinking about what else you want to see in Washington that would help address the challenges you're facing here, sharing those with me, with our office, making sure your voices are heard are really important, so that we can get policies that recognize how important it is to invest in a home, as you all know so well, person's home. And through this pandemic, we've really seen it. It struck me how many ads on the air I've seen that talk about the importance of home, because people are working from home these days, their kids are at home. We're using our homes for everything because we've been sheltering and had stay-at-home orders. And it's a reminder of just how important that is and why it's so important to invest in housing so that we can give people that home ownership opportunity that has historically been the way Americans have built wealth and provided for security for their families.
Once again, I want to thank Senator Shaheen for joining us and helping our members continue to navigate through the pandemic. On a personal note, I would like to congratulate the Senator. Last October, I flew out to DC to join members of NHAR who who honored the senator as one of our top members of this President's Circle, NAR's President's Circle for 2019. One of the key factors involved in this was that the senator has always been a champion and has shown and stepped forward to champion for realtors in New Hampshire and across the country. And we thank you for your efforts and your continued support.
Thank you, Patti, and thank you to NAR for your support. It really means a lot.
Okay. I also want to thank our members for watching and for sharing these New Hampshire Realtor videos with colleagues so that we can all stay as informed as possible. Please continue to stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Patti.
Thank you.